He has a bachelor degree in global business administration and finance and an MBA from the Thunderbird School of Global Management. He has worked with Gold & Associates, Q Financial, and Merrill Lynch, and he and his wonderful wife, Julia, have 5 kids, and they are very, very active in the community, and we are so very happy and blessed to have you here tonight. Thank you so much.
Okay, it's good to be here. It's one of these wild and crazy times in our life where when elections are approaching, especially going through primary elections, everybody's emotions, especially in a Republican primary where they're contested, everybody's fighting for their candidate, trying to have the best outcome they possibly can, and they cross over and it's an unusual experience. My first time as being state chairman, one of the promises I made is I wouldn't endorse any candidates. And I tried the best I could to be neutral. The primary night after we had everybody called, I almost felt like I was cheating on somebody to be standing on the stage with some of the candidates up there because I had worked so hard to be neutral. Now, give you an idea, if I look like I'm worn out, this has been an emotional last few days in a number of different ways. You saw with Russell Pierce and some of the things that happened. Russell's a dear friend of mine, and to see what kind of happened is mind-blowing, and I'll give you some insight to that as well as we go on tonight. But what happens now, you cross into this election cycle. You have candidates you may or may not love or like as Republican candidates. And the reality is you really need to pay particular attention to the competitions and the challenges that are happening here, because I have a theory I'll share with you tonight that I've been trying to accomplish as a state chairman. And so I'll give you a little insight. Ann and Ralph are good friends, and there's a lot of other good friends in here as well. And when we pushed through this, and when I was encouraged to run for state chairman, it was because we had a state party that was atrophying away to almost non-existence, right? We have, in our state specifically, this problem was happening in other areas, but in our state specifically, we had no money in the last election cycle, the state party. There was no ground game, there was no technology. The party's in significant debt when I took over. And so what was happening is you had this baseline that there was no growth and it was attriting. People were saying, hey, we can do this better, so they started to form different groups and organizations to try to drive the kind of output that we needed to protect the principles that we care about so deeply. And so I was encouraged to do this, and I had some organizational background. I've had the good fortune of owning some businesses that we've been able to sell since I've been chairman, so that I could spend 15 to 17 hours a day, almost every single day of the week since I've started this thing, to try to rebuild and get some health back in the party. And so before we say, hey, all these GOP candidates out there in DC and stuff are throwing us under the bus, I believe they are in a number of different ways. So let me first tell you that. And let me tell you that what the suggestion I had, and then the strategies we had, and then what we've been able to execute on. When you have a party apparatus of people, it's so critically important to recognize that the base is where all the power comes from. One of my favorite movements in my lifetime has been the Tea Party movement. This is one of these movements, and if you all participated then or it came around after the cause, you know what I mean. It wasn't a leader-driven initiative. It was a people-driven initiative. It was an organic wave that happened. It just percolated up people's dissatisfaction with the electeds, and it pushed through this country with a wave and a force that was remarkable. And did it change things? It changed things. It shifted people's accountability, it put focus where it needed to be, and it was focused on limited government and fiscal responsibility mainly, right? And then it's kind of changed and morphed a little bit over the years. But you saw this happen, and it was really meaningful. Well, when that happened, and you hear people all the time, they say Tea Party candidates or the Tea Party is going to hold these people accountable, is they know that there's a force to be reckoned with, right? And so now what's happened is the state party used to be an extremely effective force to be reckoned with because it was well financed. It had resources for the precinct committeemen and the volunteers that weren't all precinct committeemen to engage in the process, either with technology or information or ways to communicate and to engage people. And that kind of went away. And so then what happened, and this is nationwide, is candidates shift into this mode, and you've experienced it, where they're in these bubbles. They have their constituent bubbles, they have their donor bubbles, they have their independent expenditure bubbles, and so they're not dependent on anybody else to win elections. And this was almost out of necessity. When the party started to atrophy, they shift into their little bubbles. And so when we start to kind of wail on them or hold them accountable for things, their voting processes or behavior that we're not comfortable with, what do they say? What have you heard them say in the media? They say, who cares? They don't do anything for us anyways. They just kind of put us all off, right? Kind of shove us in a corner in a box. So one of the thoughts that I had is if we can create a state party that has financial resources, that has credible messaging, that has technology and tools to put into your hands to motivate and mobilize people, then guess what? We become a force to be reckoned with. So now, if we have a sweeping outcome in this general election, which I firmly believe we're going to have a good outcome in this election, then they will pay attention to what we're doing because they need us. We have candidates right now that spend all their money in the primaries, and guess who they're looking to bail them out? The state party. Have they ever done that before? No, I'm not going to bail them out necessarily, but we're going to do everything we possibly can to make sure we have the resources to win our elections. And so what happens is when you have a force to be reckoned with, like in the Tea Party movement, and like the party's becoming today, guess what happens when our young legislators are forced with making a controversial vote? Do they think, oh gosh, this special interest group that's wailing on me to do things for them is going to have my back and going to help me get reelected? Or do they go and say, this party is healthy, it has resources, has technology, has social media, has way of messaging and stuff. These guys have my back. And the likelihood is they will fall back into the party rank and they'll learn from us. And then we teach them and we hold them accountable. And some people said, you're crazy to think that way. Well, I got to tell you, today, candidates call me almost every single day. What kind of resources can you help us with? Can we do videos there? Can you help us with social media? Can we have an event there where you can train our people on messaging and stuff? So now they're becoming dependent upon the party again. So maybe the person that makes these controversial, these young lawmakers that make just crazy decisions, they will start to recognize that their bread is buttered in different places now. And the longevity that comes from a strong and healthy base is way more powerful and long and holds in perpetuity relative to the special interest groups that come and go based upon their agenda for the day. And so that's what we're trying to condition people to do, and it's been happening. And we've been seeing this kind of migration, and we're seeing a personality shift in some of our people, even some that haven't voted with us forever, in this case. And so seeing this happen is making, okay, we're doing this, and we're having good outcomes. Would you like me to kind of give you an idea of what we've done as far as outreach and the technology so you have a little bit more specifics?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll talk about outreach first. I literally was just hung up the phone with a reporter when I was in the parking lot here talking about the Navajo Nation. So when you think about the different demographics, everybody says, oh, the Hispanics should vote with us and they should be with us because their principles and values are the same. I agree. The Asian community, the African American community, the Navajos, all these, you have family, you have traditions, you have all this stuff that align closely with us. The problem that has been in our state and nationwide is that we do not show up in their communities to teach them or show them or demonstrate that they can relate to us. So literally, I'll give you an idea. I was at Mini Farms, which is way out. It's a 7-hour drive from here to get to Mini Farms in the Navajo Nation. I show up and there were 400 people there for a rally for the Republicans. We paid for the bands and the music that were there. It was a very inexpensive commitment there. But then they gave the microphone to folks, and I saw council member after council member, former chapter presidents, get up, people that are real influential there and say, it's time for us to start thinking about voting for the Republicans. This is it. And let me tell you why. And they went through all the issues that they've had that they have never been satisfied by Democrat leadership. They're ready for it. This last election cycle, they had a huge turnout in Navajos for Andy Tobin in this election cycle.
Good.
And so it's, and some people say, well, and let me tell you why Andy pulled a lot of their votes. He helped them with water rights. He helped them with road issues and things like this, to where they said, okay, this guy is kind of a doer. Let's see what we can do. So now we go up there, and it was pretty fascinating for me because I didn't know what to think. A lot of the dialogue and stuff that was happening was in Navajo. And so I get up, they ask me to speak, I give them more of a community talk. I'm here, I'm in a part of your community. Next time I come up, I will try to address you partly in Navajo. And that's, if you've ever seen that language, that's a tough one. And so I'll do the best I can, but I'm here to talk to you, that we're here to serve you and to try to help you and to be there and listen and stuff. And so it was really well received. Sat down, and I went off with the ladies that were serving food and stuff and helped to serve and do things. And then there was a guy that grabbed the microphone. It was a Democrat agitator, got up on the stage and said, "Hey, Mr. Republican, come back in here. You need to hear this. Hey, Mr. Republican, come back in here." So I came in, sat down in the front row, and he goes, "I want you to know, Mr. Republican, you're in Democrat country." And there was a scattering of applause and stuff like that. And then he just started to wail on everything. This person had a chance to do this, didn't do this for us, didn't do this. Talked about the mountains, Mount Humphrey's a sacred mountain, and I don't know if you saw that whole thing with the snow and how they were spraying gray water on them, and so they were soiling the mountain, and just one after another, just went down this list. And then I got up, and then so I listened, and I just sit there and nod, and I'm trying not to react or show emotion when this guy was doing this. I asked the organizer if I could have him one more chance to kind of rebuttal his comments. And so I got up there. Well, all the things he had complained about had been stopped by the tribal councils, not by the Republican Party. The councils had voted against this. And they had like the water, for instance. They had a well, freshwater well on that property that they could have drilled and used that clean water on the mountain, and the tribal councils voted no against it. So it was that kind of stuff where I went through it. But then I said, okay, you're right, I'm in Democrat country. And a couple of the same people clapped again. I said, but let me talk to you. Do you still have water issues? And I said, yeah. Do you still have problems with your roads? Yes. Do you still have the poorest nation in the country? Yes. Do you still have the highest rate of suicide, lack of jobs of any group? Your highways still don't have fencing, so your livestock wanders off and gets killed by cars all the time. Is this still issues for you? Yes. Well, that's Democrat country leadership. I said, it's time for you to have Republicans. And that's how they responded. So they got pretty fired up, and the conversation changed very quickly, and I sat down. So I only gave them like a 2-minute little rebuttal and sat down. And then after I did that, some of the elders of the Navajo Nation came up and said the way to develop voters in our state is by showing up and shaking hands. That's it. So it's being part. It's being here and being able to say that back to this guy. Because if I would have left, he would have just flattened everything we tried to do, and it would have been over. So we're there. The Asian community. Give another the Asian community is the fastest growing demographic we have in our state. The Hispanic population is the largest, 33%. The Asian community is the fastest. And the Asian community is made up of, we have a coalition that's formed that has Philippines, Korea, Japan, Taiwan, China, Bangladesh, Pakistan, India, Laos, Cambodia. I mean, I can keep going down this list. This is a group that's here. They're doing these events. The Philippine community is the largest demographic within the Asian community. But they all sat around. We discussed all the dynamics that we want to do. Most of them are actually registered Republicans, but they do not participate in the political process. Why do you think? No support. Where did they come from?
The Philippines.
Yeah, and a lot of these nations that were communist countries. And so if they were outspoken in politics or they engaged in the political process, they were jeopardizing every bit of their livelihood and maybe even their lives. So some of these countries, so they shifted through this. And Vietnam was another one that we worked with. But I'll give you an example of one community specifically. So if you've watched me, I know some of you see the Facebook or the Twitter posts that we're putting, I've been to virtually every single Chinese community event that you can have. From the dragon boat race to the Fong Yi family banquet, okay? So everything that you can imagine. The Vietnamese community, same deal. Vietnamese beauty pageants and lunar festivals and this and that, and same with all of them. And when I show up, they usually give me a chance to speak, and they're not letting the Democrats speak, and they're not there, by the way. The Democrats are not there. When they talk about the Democrats being at all the minority events, they are not there. They're not at Hispanic events, they're not at Asian events, they're not at African American events, they're not at nationalization meetings. We are everywhere, and they're not there. Okay, so it is a fairy tale, at least in today's life it is. But the Vietnamese population, how many of you are Vietnam vets here? Handful of you. So the ribbon bar that you wear, yes, thank you.
Welcome home.
Yeah. So the ribbon bar that you have from Vietnam is the yellow bar with 3 red stripes, right? That is the South Vietnamese flag that symbolizes heritage and freedom. So our vets share that with the South Vietnamese vets. It's a very important symbol to their community. So I got a call from the chairman of the Vietnamese American community here and said, hey, do you think we can get the South Vietnamese flag proclaimed as a symbol of the Vietnamese American community. So kind of like a flag day just for the Vietnamese community. He wanted to try Phoenix and anything else I could do. And I said, I'll see what we can do. So we have now, it's proclaimed in Chandler, Mesa, Scottsdale, Gilbert, I'm missing one, Glendale, and then the state of Arizona just did it. Governor Brewer proclaimed it. And so what's neat about this is our Vietnam vets share that symbol with that community, and so it's remarkable. Now here's what's happened. So since the election, primary election, now we have our candidates. The Vietnamese radio, it is the funniest thing that you've ever heard, and at least in my term. And the Vietnamese radio is all in Vietnamese. And what's neat about it is they're giving these public service announcements, and they're helping our candidates. And I heard one recording for Doug Ducey, and so they're speaking in Vietnamese, and they hear Doug Ducey, Cold Stone, Arizona Republican, vote Republican. And you see this, and I'm thinking, wow, this is amazing. But they were running that ad every single hour for our candidates and things. They've organized a fundraiser event that's going to be hopefully in the middle of October, where they intend to raise $30,000 for the Republican Party. Okay, this is team stuff. This isn't them feeling they owe us. This is now we showed up as part of their community, and they're part of our community now. And the Vietnamese recruited and have been elected 140 Vietnamese precinct committeemen. So it's going to be a very different county meeting. We may even have to have a translator there for that meeting. So it's exceptional to watch this movement happening, but it's like that. The black community, the African American community, the informant is a African American population that circulates and to 100,000 households in Arizona. And they interviewed me, and I've been to multiple evangelical churches. I leave my church and I go to their churches, and I do what I can to just be part of the community where I can. Some of them allow me to speak, and when I speak, I don't go up and talk about Republican stuff. I'll say, hey, this is I'm Robert Graham, the chairman of the Republican Party, but then I share a gospel message because we can relate on that. And that's it. And then they come up and we talk afterward, the congregation. It's just fantastic. And but they published an article saying, and they quoted me a few times saying, look, you shouldn't just fall down and be Democrats. You should actually start to listen to both sides and do it. So that writer took that article and then he shifted it and made it a cry for African Americans to re-register as independents and listen to both parties and vote their conscience as it relates to who they think will serve them best. So we've heard this in the Navajos, we've heard this in the Asian communities, in African American communities, in Hispanic communities. It's like it's a different animal because and Heidi could probably support this. There's a lot of moving parts and there's a lot of preconceived ideals and relationships. So I'll give you an example. So when we started to form a coalition, we would talk to one group and say, hey, we'd love to have you. We're having this meeting this night. We'd have to be a part of this coalition. They'd say, who was on the coalition? And then we would list off some of the people. And they would say, if that person's on the coalition, we're not coming. So, like, oh. And then I'd call that other person. Hey, do you have a problem with this other person on it? Because they said, yeah, we're not coming if they're coming. And so it's just like, oh my gosh. So what happened, the efficiency of having a coalition changed away from coalition to where we have to do one-on-one meetings, and that's fine. We'll do what we got to do to develop relationships and get in the community the best we possibly can. But it's all moving in the right direction. We have one gentleman, Jose Gonzalez, who is the chairman of an evangelical Hispanic community that has over 500 congregations involved, and he's leading the charge. So you start to see those kind of things taking shape, and we're trying the best we can. You may have seen him. He's very comfortable not being out front at our events and things like that, but he's been showing up. I think he showed up at your LD meeting, didn't he, this last time? And so, and his brother and one other person, another pastor. So they're engaging. Everybody's engaging. And so what it is, it's not about outreach. In my mind, it's community development. It's engaging people and inviting them to participate. And so if any of you are state committeemen, you're going to see a pretty cool exhibition in our next state meeting because we're bringing a lot of these communities together to participate in the program. But so we're seeing it. So this is the kind of stuff we have to keep cultivating and moving forward. And it's pretty fantastic. Last thing I'll touch on, and then you can start asking me questions. I think we've got Ann presented some great questions, is the technology. Okay, when I was running for state chair, A lot of people that were in our base said we want to be communicated with better. We want to know what's going on, number one. That was the number one thing that I heard. And so within the first 2 or 3 weeks that I started as chair, we implemented a kind of a newsletter system. So you can sign up for a newsletter, and every week I give a chairman's update. And there's little blurbs, but it leads to bigger stories so people can kind of see what's going on. And then lately, I've just started writing this On the Road series so everybody can see where I've been and what I've been doing. And it's had good response in the sense that, hey, I've been in this place, this community, doing this, on and on and on and on and on. And so these are the dynamics that we have. So that's one. But what was really interesting is when I started as state chair, think about the state of Arizona. There's over 6 million folks. There's 3 million registered 3 million plus registered voters. And guess how big the email list was? 17,000 people. That's it. We're supposed to get our message out, and this is how many years in the making, and email's been around for a while, so we should have a great big list. And so what we did is we took it from there, and we have close to 1 million emails now. And so when you think about that, that's almost 1/3 of all of our registered voters. So there's independents and Democrats in that list, and there's a lot of GOP or Republicans or people that are parties not affiliated, whatever. There's a big collection of who they are, and we get to communicate to them every single week on various different issues. Twitter, Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, all these things that you've heard about and maybe some of you have engaged in and others. Here's the way to think about those platforms. Think about them in the sense of creating a bigger audience. So when you have more people follow you on Twitter, then that's more people that when you send a message out, it's going to land on them somewhere, whether it's going to be on their computer or on their handheld device or what have you. It's going to get to them in a very intimate fashion. Facebook's the same way. If somebody likes your site, then they start to get information from you. And so it's a way to do it. Pinterest and Instagram, pictures say a million words, right? And when you look at a picture, you can kind of get a feel for it. So there's all these different ways to get people to follow you and to engage with them that's going to be relevant to them. And the communities we just talked about, the Asian community, Latino community, the African American community, 99% of their communications comes to a handheld device, their cell phone or what have you. So they communicate more so with those demographics to the cell phones or to tablets or what have you than other demographics do. So it's important to be there. We are thousands of percent ahead of the Dems in this state. We are just blown away. We probably have the greatest social media platform in the country as a relative to state parties, both on the R's and the D side. If you come into our office and you want to see our social media war room, it's changed since the last time you guys have been in. We have 3 stations now, and we're going to add 2 more if budget permits, that have 4 monitors at each station. So in the upper left, they're actually monitoring all the chatter that's happening on the web about somebody we're tracking. So if you're tracking Duval, or you're tracking Ducey, or you're tracking Felicia Rulini, or Mark Bernovich or something, we could track and see what the chatter is about them real time, literally by the second. And when there's more information out there, there's things called bubble streams. These bubbles get really big. When we see a big bubble that's red, that means that something negative. If it's our candidate, we see a big red bubble, that means some people are talking badly about our candidate. We can literally click on that, see who originated the conversation, see what the conversation is. We can see what information is trending nationally, like what people are going to be more interested in, probably not our race. So we'll take that trending national information, label it. If it's positive, put it on our candidate. If it affiliates with them or associates with them, or if it's negative, we'll put it on the other guy's candidate, and we will push it out there. And what's happened is you can steer the negative sentiment away from our candidates. Okay, so the conversation becomes public or positive. If it's negative about the other guys, we're going to stoke the fire. We're going to keep it going and keep perpetuating the information so that more reaches more people. And it's really happening, and it's pretty mind-blowing. On the primary night, our group had like 1 million something mentions the 3 days after the primary, and the Dems had a little more than us. They had about 2 million impressions out there. When you took our 5 impressions, it reached 12 million people. Their 1.8 or almost 2 million only reached about 2.5 million people. So that gives you an idea. You start to control the conversations, and we have something called groundswell. Not control, that's kind of a bad word, but we influence the conversations to kind of steer them in the direction we want them to go. And it's not that you're going to have your opinion, you're going to make your remarks, but we're bringing information to them that's more relevant and they care more about, so they're going to start commenting on the stuff that we bring them because we know it's trending favorably for the people to communicate on. So it's just a bunch of navigation that we're trying to have as far as good outcomes there.
You know, I want to ask you about
Sure.
that in talking about social media and bringing back the primaries. The numbers of the people that turned out were so low. What do you see that we can do outside of social media, that being the wave, but what can we do above and beyond that to get people out for the generals? And as Ann says on her question, what are our chances?
So this is the number one consideration in elections. How do you win elections? Turnout, more votes. That's simple, right? So that's the formula for success. This is always the challenge, is to try to persuade people to vote and vote for your candidates. And so as it relates to the primary, it's back to that atrophy. If I were to go reach over there and grab this cord and get shocked, I'd probably back away from it and never grab it again, right? Because I felt pain and you back away from pain. But what's happened in our electorate, both on the left and the right, is there's been incredible atrophy where people are backing away from the election process, the political process, because they've been feeling an enormous amount of pain and feeling let down. And so we had, talking about turnout, nationwide in the primary cycle, there's been 123 million eligible voters in the primaries. This is all eligible voters, and only 18 million voted in the primaries. Okay, so you think about that, and it's kind of mind-blowing in a way that our people are so disengaged in the process that they're stepping back. Well, what we've done for the last handful of months, we've registered more voters. We went through a phase up until the cutoff in the primary. We registered as many as 3,500 new Republicans a week. Okay, so we were doing that. And we'll see the new numbers haven't been reported yet, and we'll see they should come out. The Secretary of State has no legislative basis of when they have to report, but it should be coming out hopefully this month or early October. Yes?
Yes, how do we know
Here's
that
Senator Pierce,
this social media that you talked of, this application that you brought out, is being used against conservative candidates for the benefit of establishment candidates? That's what I think you're experiencing that apathy from.
Well, and I appreciate you asking that question, because I'm certain it's being used against them. But it's being used, it should be being used by our conservative candidates as well as the establishment candidates, okay? So here's the thing, this is the process that we have to engage in, and the process that we have to celebrate. If you believe in a representative republic, number one, and if you believe in the electoral process, this whole democratic process of elections, then you fight for the candidates you care most about. This is why we crushed people in the Tea Party movement, is because we had the people. We had the people, we had the resources, we had the communication, we have had all this. And when I hear establishment versus this group or whatever, just recognize it's candidate versus candidate. And they have every right under the sun equally to engage in tools, systems, and processes to win their elections. Now, if our candidates don't win the primaries, whose fault is that? It's the base, it's ours, it's my fault, it's your fault, it's everybody's fault if our people don't win, because we didn't get the message persuadable enough to get people to turn out for that candidate. That's bottom line. And people say, well, money. Well, yeah, we'll go raise money. We saw Cantor get taken out, right? He spent $5 million in media, and the other guy, what, $126,000 for his whole campaign?
That was CSG that did
Yeah, and he won, right? That's exactly right.
We also saw Compton win too.
Right, so this is it, but it's back to, here's the hardest thing for me. I gotta tell you, one of the biggest frustrations for me sitting in this office is the blame game hits my desk every single day, multiple times. And what's happened is even the people that are blaming aren't taking accountability for the outcomes. See, here's the thing, this is a people game. I think about the Constitution. What does the first line of the preamble of the Constitution say?
We the people.
So it's we the people. It's not we the this or this party or this political consideration or we the conservatives. It's we the people. And so this body, this basis is to engage in the process. We the people have to engage. If term limits, whenever people argue term limits, I'm like, you know what a term limit is? An effective counter campaign to get the person out of office. That's why the system is set up the way the system is set up. And so we have to take accountability as people that if our people don't win. And so this is the process. I got to tell you, I am exhausted at the blame game. This is something that I never thought would be able to suck the life out of me. It does every single day. Because I get not one email, 50 emails. Oh, did you know this person did this? Well, yeah, what did you do? That's what I want to keep coming back, but I don't. I don't come back with them on that. But so there's an opportunity here to engage in a process, and guess what? If you want to come down to the state party and learn how to do all this stuff, the door is wide open, and I would love to do it. And here's a great chance to learn it right now while you're actually in a campaign cycle, and then take these skill sets back and get other activists engaged. And then you wouldn't believe what you can do sitting behind your home computer, shaking it up at a high volume.
You know, I wanted to ask you, because when we're talking about one of the biggest problems that we as a Republican Party and conservatives in general face is the divisiveness amongst ourselves. And the Tea Partiers, God love the Tea Partiers, because you guys are united. There's not that fractioning going on. So I wanted you to speak just really briefly as to what's been going on and how our own party members are turning against each other when they smell blood in the water. Is that not weakening us, as in the case with Russell
Pierce? For
Pierce?
sure. So I have to disagree a little bit with your comment about the Tea Party movement. This Tea Party club might be unified, but if you go across town and talk to another Tea Party group,
that's true, again.
they've got a whole different perspective. And you go to another one in the south
true,
of
yeah.
the valley or the south of the state, you start to see it. You start to see this where what they've done is modified the vision of the Tea Party to include a lot of other issues that become divisive or controversial. So there's not that unity anymore with it. Here's back to my point about having a strong, healthy base, okay? We as conservatives hold Ronald Reagan up all the time, right?
Yes.
Some of you may say, no, whatever. I do. I care about him. I think he was a fantastic president in so many different ways. And what was his famous line that you hear quoted all the time about 80%?
Amnesty.
What's that?
There you go again.
No, do you like Ronald Reagan?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so what did he say about 80%? Help me with this.
If somebody
Personally, I can agree with 80% of the time is good enough to work with.
Yeah, and they're 80% my friend, not 20% my enemy. Okay? So here's the dynamic, and here's what I want to suggest. Is we maintain conservative values. You don't change your principles or your values for anybody. If you do that, you've already failed. You've already sold out and you're not moving. He didn't say drop your conservative principles or values. What he understood is the additive principle is much more powerful than subtracting or the divisive principles. And so it's much easier to convert somebody along the lines of the conservative principles than it is to take them to the left. I am certain of that, because if you sit down with most people, do you think they want jobs, opportunity, prosperity, and safety and education?
Yeah.
Sounds like the core guts of a lot of conservative things we discussed, isn't it? But they don't see it as that because we don't spend the time to sit down and talk to them, because we've got our flamethrowers turned on the people in these rooms. We're doing it. We're fighting each other versus turning the guns outside the tent. This is probably a terrible, I'll just use better language. I saw an artist rendering, and he's talking about politics, and he had a little boy inside a tent urinating on everybody in the tent. And then he said, we can do this, and then they showed the flaps just barely cracked open, and you see a stream of urine coming out where he's peeing outside the tent, okay? And so the idea is if we start to stop doing this with our guns, and start doing this at the enemy, we eviscerate the progressives. You stop them. When you stop progressive influence in the state, and let me tell you how it works too. They invest. People don't. One of the reasons I've been successful raising money in the state is because I don't ask for donations. I ask them to invest in the outcome of the state. These people that write big checks are generally successful, right? Business leaders, and they've been approached by investing. If we create a big barrier because we have an active grassroots and a game that's really powerful, that we're calling people, knocking doors, doing our social media stuff, it creates a barrier of entry. And so the progressives have less incentive to spend money in our state because they know it's going to be a hard walk for them to actually accomplish what they want to accomplish. So it's not that their money dries up. It will go to a different state. They will go to a less formidable opponent, and they will invest in those states. So now you take away the progressive influence. Does it become easier for our Republican candidates and our people in Arizona to start making the right decisions?
Yeah.
It's just the nature of the beast, and we know this fundamentally. When we deal with businesses or if we've been on sports teams and we've been doing these, you see this kind of conversion process that happens in people, but you got to take the bad influences away. And that's what we're trying to do by being successful. And that's a principle that goes from peer pressure to our kids all the way to politics. If you take away the influences, you get better behavior, if you believe that this behavior is the best outcome for the state.
But Robert, how much do you think that unity among the members of the party itself can build that confidence back up in the voting public, that they do
It's
go out?
huge. It's huge. So what happens again, let me just ask you guys go to parties, right? Party like fun parties, family parties, things like that. And you've probably been to other social events. If people were sitting in the corner bickering and arguing and carrying on and stuff, would that be a party you would look forward to attending?
No.
No, it's not. I mean, I'm into debate. Bring it on. You know, we can have a fierce debate. You can probably tell by some of my answers I'm pretty passionate about the outcomes. But you just don't hang with people that you believe are fighting and just miserable all the time. And so you repel people. So keep the debate civil and do everything you possibly can and make sure that it's inviting and pulling people in. Our candidates and such, if they're not lined up with us, then they can pull and divide and do things, right? Especially if their policy is not consistent with the Republican policies. Then they start to see, or if it doesn't even line up with their constituents, for heaven's sakes, you start to go, my gosh, what is happening here? And you start to feel that. But what happens is if we have unified groups of folks and they can demonstrate that unity prevails, then you have good outcomes. Arthur, who gave us the report on Dan? When you gave us a report on CD9, that's a unified effort that's helping to get Wendy Rogers elected. And it's happening and it's working and you see people actually doing things. That's a power. Are there people in that group that you probably don't agree with all the time?
All the time.
Yeah. See, that's what I thought you'd say. Yes.
Before I ask my question, I just wanted to, with Cantor, he spent more money on steak dinners than his opponent spent on the entire campaign.
See, this is a good point because there's vulnerability. I'm a strategist, okay? I got to tell you that how many years did it take us to get in this situation? Lots, right? To get out of it, we're immediate gratification people. We watch the candle burn down to the base, and then we want to rebuild the candle overnight. It's not going to happen like that, okay? So we have to engage in process. Cantor, if you watched his behavior, where was he on election day? Was he in Virginia? Was he in his district? Where was he? Washington, D.C. doing what?
The people's business.
Yeah, well, he's having dinner with, or having golf and dinner with a bunch of lobbyists and doing this thing, not with his people. Okay, that type of behavior is broadcast. You can see it by people not showing up in their counties and their districts.
That strategy was run by the people who were trained at the Center for Self-Governance. They're the ones who did it.
That's right.
For every dollar that they spend, the opponents have to spend 10.
Yeah, that's right.
That's their rule.
Well, the ground game is so effective and so powerful. Do you have another question?
Yeah. The concern that I'm finding with when I talk to people is the Republican Party is filled with Republicans that are not adhering to the platform. They think that if they go more to the left and more moderate, then they'll be able to get those extra votes. You don't win elections by doing that. You win elections by sticking to your principles. And so the question I have is, what are we going to do about the
Bob Worsley's.
The Bob Worsley's. Well, Abraham Lincoln said that our task is to preserve what we've inherited, what we've been given by our founding fathers. And he says that the danger that's going to come is not going to be from an outside source. It's going to come from amongst us. And we are in the age of the domestic enemy of the Constitution.
Yeah.
Okay?
I agree.
And there are people in the Senate, people in the House, Republicans that are domestic enemies. And I say that
Absolutely.
very,
We got two of them.
very boldly.
Yeah. So let me
Domestic enemies.
address you.
How do we get those out?
Okay, so it's back to, we just talked about it, organizing your ground game and getting the people you want elected, okay? But let me throw two things at you too, because this is something that I want to make sure that if you really adhere to the Constitution, if you believe in the words and you believe that it was a document that helped catapult our nation into amazing outcomes in reality, okay, put us as the shining star, right? Then I want to suggest one thing too. we're a representative republic. We have some candidates, for instance, and I'm not going to name any names. We have people that voted inconsistent with what I would consider Republican.
Absolutely.
Nice. I called these people. I didn't go out and blast them off the planet media-wise. I have every opportunity to do that. The media would love me to do that, okay? I called them and said, why in the world did you vote this way? Because everything else you've done up to this vote has been very conservative and you're there. And now people want to scorch you and take you out. He said, I did it for my constituents, okay? But listen to this. No, you can't say that to you because this has been set up as a representative republic, right? This is it. Do you think, and I can tell you because I've been in Mojave County, I've been in Santa Cruz, I've been in Pinal and Pima and Yavapai and Gila and Graham and La Paz and all these different counties, I can tell you they have different personalities, they have different dynamics. Navajo compared to Yuma, very different, okay? Different needs, different outcomes, different energy resources, everything, okay? And so if these guys can say to me, hey, this is the way I voted because of this, and this is my constituents. I may not agree with it, but I can understand it if they did it the way they did it. Some of the people that voted the wrong way on some of these issues before, they were all romanced and endorsed away by special interests. Some weren't, okay? So what we have to do as educated, informed voters is we have to try to filter that, number one, okay? Number two is back to my previous points, organize. Ground game, make it happen, engage voters, have discussions with them so they know who they are. If they outgame us because they spend more money, then we have to outgame them and spend more money. Okay, that's the way to do it. And if you become a very healthy base as far as the party, again, they're going to behave themselves differently when they don't have these outside special interest influences coming in to make it happen.
Hey, Robert.
And so I'm big on that, yes.
I want to keep you on schedule here so we're not making you late. We've only got time for maybe one or two questions, but really quick as I'm passing this over to you. What is the most important race right now?
Okay, so governor obviously is our stopgap on legislative process. So I'm going to give you a longer answer than they probably want. So we need to win this, okay, on the governor's race. If you think Fred Duvall's a centrist, he's got you all fooled. If you think he's independent, he is as far from it as he possibly can. I know more. You've probably seen the letters I've been putting out. I know all about Fred Duvall, more so than probably his mother does. We've done opposition research. We know every state he's lobbied in, every one of his clients, every scandal he's been involved. I don't know if you just saw what we put out, how he helped free 16 terrorists as a protocol guy for Clinton. Okay, Clinton's here. We put this out. This guy is a dirtbag, okay? So we need to keep him out of office. At everything we possibly can do, we're going to stop this guy. He lies about education. He lies about, he's made, under his leadership with the Board of Regents, they've increased tuition up to 8 times, and it's been a 100% increase. What that translates to you, they always talk about how Republicans have an assault on the middle class. But what he's done in the state of Arizona, he's made it so that only the poorest poor and the wealthiest can go to school without going into massive debt. Poorest poor, they get the Pell Grants, the dynamics there. They need the assistance and the support, to try to help move things along. The richest folks, they're doing their thing. But middle America is where the guts are continuously. That's the volume and the wave to push forward. And so we want all of these folks to have the best shot at education. But when a guy he raised tuition twice before the legislature cut it. Cut budgeting toward schools and stuff like that. So when you hear him say he did that as a result of, he's a liar, okay? He did it twice before. So now you go into this component here, and we get criticized all the time when our legislators sold state buildings and did things like that, but you know what they didn't do? They didn't raise taxes. And if they would have raised taxes, then they would have had a dynamic that would have been very uncomfortable because they're penalizing hardworking taxpayers that are feeling the pinch of the economy, and then they raise taxes on them. So they solved the budget crisis in a very creative way. What did he do? Flipped the switch, pumped up tuition, crushing on hardworking taxpayers all in one big shot. There was a question back here.
Do you believe in a closed primary?
Yeah, I'm glad you answered that. So let me give you my answer on that one because, this is an interesting question. This is another interview I had today about closed primaries. First and foremost, I think Republicans should be voting in Republican primaries, okay? So that's number one. Now the challenge is, we've got this open primary right now, all right? And so I talked to a reporter today, and this is how I laid it out. So I have actually been talking to people to be on a committee to discuss closing the primary. Now here's what the risk is. I've talked to some people that are like, oh, we just gotta just do it and close it. Well, do you know who's gonna pay for the primary? Okay, so the state, I brought it up to Ken Bennett, he goes, well, get ready to pay for it. Well, if this costs us $2 or $3 million, the state party has to raise it. Well, let me tell you, raising money for elections is hard enough. Raising money for that's gonna be virtually impossible. So what I wanna do is put a committee together, and I'm already talking to state chairmen that have been able to close their primary effectively, and some state chairmen that actually closed it and had to reopen it because they couldn't afford to do it. Okay, so we're trying to figure out, some are paying for it, some aren't paying for it. So I want to know who's not paying for it, and I want to know it. So it's got to be a very intentional discussion of how it's going to work best, okay? That question has come up a lot because of the increase in primary voter, or independents that voted in this primary on the GOP side. So here's what I had the discussion with Ben Giles of the Capital Times today. I said, okay, everybody's citing this. Well, I want to tell you that I've been in the African American community, and all their leaders are telling them to register as independents and vote their conscience. So that might actually show progress toward converting people. I know you're shaking your head, but listen, the Navajos are doing it. The Asians are doing this. All these kind of people. We have to get them to, that's a half step. We got to get them to take the full step to Republican balance and what have you. He also said, well, this huge turnout. Well, I can tell you that I received the phone calls and the emails from our ultra-conservative part of the party that have re-registered or dumped the GOP registration because they didn't think it's conservative enough. There's a lot of those people out there. The last thing is, if you look at the different conservative natures of the different gubernatorial people, Doug would be considered one of the most conservative candidates out of that mix, right?
No.
So is he, well, maybe out of the mix, we had how many candidates? 6, started with 8 or something like that? Okay, so if we had a real moderate push into the independent votes, you would have seen a much narrower gain by Ducey. There may have been some other candidates that were more moderate that would have taken it, but he had a decisive win as far as margins are concerned. So that's one thing to say, that we're looking at every single component of this. And Russell Pierce is one of the guys that I talked about putting this committee together, because we're for closed primaries, but we have to make sure that we have an intentional, smart approach so we don't cut our legs off by accident. Because cutting your legs off means, yeah, you get this closed primary, but you have $0 for a general election, and you get crushed in the general election. So this is where all hands on deck have to apply to this, and a lot of people that have had a lot of experience can engage in this.
How about caucusing to shorten the field?
Yeah, amen. Well, here's the other part. So shorten the field. I'll address this because you brought it up. How do you do that? Okay, so let me tell you the conversations I had. I was in one meeting with a bunch of donors, probably 15 different donors, and I brought up the fact that I was going to be interviewing all the candidates that said that they want to get involved and stuff, and just kind of encourage them around, and maybe dissuade them to go into persuade them to go into other ones that would be more fitting for their skill sets and their experience and stuff like that. And I had people stand up and say, you do that, and I'm done. I will never give a penny to the party again. This is the Republican Party, and we believe in individualism and the value of accomplishment. If they want to get in the race, they get in the race, and the prerogative. On the other side of the spectrum, similar meetings where people say, hey, how can you clear the field? How do you do this? Well, what I've done with some candidates and actually did clear, we would have had a greater field, believe it or not, in the gubernatorial race. But I sat down with people and said, okay, you want to run for governor because you believe you can do better. It's always the place, right? Remember, massive egos, you have to have an ego to believe you're the best person. And it's not a criticism, that's a reality. Of any candidate, you have to have an ego to believe that you can do better. So we sit down, but then I say, okay, so do you have a volunteer coordinator in every district in the state? Oh, you don't? Okay, how much money have you raised? What does your staff look like? Okay, do you have a social media presence? Most of them don't. Okay, even today, most of them don't. Do you have, what data are you using? Stuff like that, and they start going, oh. And then you say, well, this is what you need to win. It's a presidential election at the state level. And when you have to have somebody working for you every single place you go. And so some of them backed away. But the other benefit of a crowded field, even though we spend a lot of money, is we engage the voters. I had, the Arizona Republic was doing an article about how 3 of our gubernatorial candidates would not get behind Doug Ducey. And then she's asking me, and I started to spin it away from that and kind of pivoted to the good stuff that we're doing as a party. And she said, Robert, we've given enough airtime for the party the last 10 months. the Dems need just a little bit. And I'm like, oh, come on. You know, I was trying to spin it around so that we would have some positive stuff. And so the voters today know Doug Ducey. They know Mark Brnovich. They know Michelle. They know Jeff DeWitt, even though he doesn't have a competition, because we've engaged them in the debate and stuff. So they think they had over 50 debates in the gubernatorial candidate in the primary. So the voter base out there is way more engaged. And Duval, Felicia, Terry Goddard had to go from 0 to 60 in a matter of days, and it just doesn't happen. So great questions. You guys are fantastic. I wish I could stay longer. This meeting was an add-on today, and I apologize for that. But yeah, we got a couple of them, right?
We actually got a couple of them.
Yeah. Okay, good. And then if you guys have my email is my email, and if any of you have emailed me and asked me questions, hopefully you've gotten a pretty quick response. And if you haven't, I'll tell you. Right now, I probably get a few hundred emails a day because of the time of year we're in right now. And so if you email me, I will respond. It may not be the first day, the second day, or even the third day, but I will respond to your email and your questions. So don't hesitate. If you ever want to stop in and I'm there, I'll make time for you, okay? Because it's important for everybody's ideas to be shared, and we need to move things forward, like the closed primaries, things like that. We have to engage in this process and just kind of know where all the pitfalls and the benefits are so that we make smart choices going forward as a body. So make calls, walk, do everything you possibly can to
Robert,
win.
we can tell everyone to be a PC or they're not really involved. They're not
Yeah,
really
okay,
involved.
so I got to tell a story now, so thanks for saying that. Look at 10 minutes, I think I'm all right. Okay, so I had a guy come into our office, and my gosh, this guy was mad. I came in behind him, so when I was in jeans and a t-shirt, so whatever, it was one of those days where I didn't have any meetings, so I dressed more comfortably. So I came in, he's screaming at our front desk person, not being real nice, and just ripping into her, and he's talking about how we went after Duval with this tuition thing. Well, he's saying it was half-truths and all this, and the Arizona Republic did a fact check on us, and 4 stars out of 4 stars, it was true, that what we're saying about him with the tuition is accurate. So he went crazy, all this stuff, and he's just berating her. And you guys know Kathy Hedges? Yeah. Kathy's a pretty tough cookie, and she doesn't like me getting into the way of somebody to defend her. So I just walked past. I went into my office, and I listened to this guy. This guy would not go away. We have volunteers in there. We've got student interns in there and all stuff. And I'm like, I've had it. So I went out, and I confronted the guy. And I said, first and foremost, don't talk to my staff like this. You need to leave. And he's like, well, you did the message. And I said, you need to leave. Fred Duvall's a half-truth himself, so don't say we're half-truths. And I kind of went into it, and I wasn't the most professional in the world as I'm trying to throw this guy out of the place. And so he keeps saying, Republican platform, this, that, and the other. And I don't like the way Republicans talk, and their platform needs to change. And what was my question to him?
Oh, PC.
Are you a PC? And he goes, no. And I said, then you have no right to have this conversation.